When I first watched the interview with Trezell and Jacqueline West, the adoptive parents of missing boys Orson, born classic, and Orrin, born sincere, I knew something was off. And in my first video, I walked through the initial reaction, the body language, the emotional void, and the things immediately that didn't sit right. But after going back again and again, I started noticing that things ran a lot deeper. This video is not just a breakdown of one or two moments. These are the 10 biggest red flags I found across the entire interview. The behavioral, verbal, and emotional patterns that reveal so much more than what's really being said. If you haven't seen the first breakdown yet, I recommend checking it out for full context first. But if you're here just for a deeper dive, these are moments that stayed with me. These are the moments that I just could not ignore, and the ones that, together, form a devastating picture. If you find this kind of analysis valuable, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. It helps a lot, and I've got a whole bunch more breakdowns like this coming. Now, let's get into the 10 red flags that, well, once you see them, you can't really unsee them. Red flag number 1, the grunt that gave him away.
Our boys, they are going to be rambunctious, okay?
This is one of the few moments that Trezell West tried to describe his adopted sons, and the word he chose, rambunctious. Let's pause there. Rambunctious isn't affectionate. It's not how a grieving parent describes children they love and miss. It means uncontrollably energetic, a handful, a disruption. It's a word adults often use when they've had enough. And right after he says it, listen closely. He grunts, a short guttural sound, one that doesn't come from sadness. It comes from irritation. This isn't a man lost in heartbreak. It's a man leaking resentment. That one word and that one sound pulled back the curtain on how he really felt about the boys. But it doesn't stop there. Later in the interview, Trezell tries to end things abruptly.
So please, if y'all could get back on what you guys are doing, that's pretty much it.
This wasn't a man desperate for answers. He was desperate to wrap it up. You can feel his agitation growing, the tension in his voice, the way he almost rushes to eject himself from the conversation. He's not grieving, he's annoyed. And when you stack that ending moment with the earlier grunt and the word rambunctious, a picture starts to form, not of heartbreak, not of helplessness, but of someone who's short-tempered, quick to anger, and deeply resentful. Someone who doesn't have emotional control. Someone whose irritation slips out in moments he thinks no one will notice. This behavior gives us a glimpse of a disturbing reality. This is not someone equipped to care for two energetic little boys. Because this is the kind of person who might let his anger take control. And that one careless grunt, it wasn't small. It was a leak and a warning. Red flag number 2, language leaks the truth. Throughout this interview, Trezell and Jacqueline West choose their words very carefully, but not carefully enough. Because even when someone is lying, their language still tells the truth. Listen to how they describe the setting.
It was cold. It was getting dark, getting cold, and I hit a bunch of corners.
At face value, those might sound like harmless environmental details. But in deceptive analysis, we listen for more than just content. We listen for leakage. Because people trying to sell a lie often dress it up with atmosphere instead of emotion. They don't sell a story, they set a scene. And when they do, symbolic language can slip out. Cold, dark, hit. These aren't just neutral words. They're emotionally loaded. They evoke mood, fear, isolation, danger. And when placed in the context of a missing child case, words like cold and dark may describe more than just the weather. But the word that raises the most flags, hit.
And I hit a bunch of corners.
That's not how someone in emotional panic talks. You'd expect, I looked everywhere, or I drove around frantically. But hit corners is mechanical, quick, aggressive. And when you pair that with a red flag number 1, with Trezell's visible frustration, his sharp tone, his grunt, his short temper, that single word hit starts to feel more loaded. Because maybe it wasn't just corners he hit. Maybe the word slipped out because it was closer to the truth than he meant it to be. We're not saying he confessed, but people don't always leak truth in full sentences. They leak it in phrases, in word choices, in the tone beneath the surface. And when a word like hit shows up next to signs of short temper and emotional leakage, you have to ask, was he really talking about turning corners? Or was he telling us something he didn't mean to say? Red flag number 3, neglect disguised as normal. Sometimes the most chilling part of a story isn't what people say. It's how casually they say it. Listen to this.
We thought it was a good idea that our youngest two go outside and play with chalk on the back patio.
Stop right there. They've just told us it was cold. That's how the whole story starts. And yet they decide it's a good idea to send 2 toddlers outside alone to draw with chalk. That's not parenting, that's neglect. And it's being presented as if it's completely normal. Then there's this.
I'm throwing wood, bringing it inside the house. My wife's inside. She was actually wrapping gifts. I realized that I left the gate open.
Each of them frames their behavior in a way that sounds reasonable, even responsible. But when you step back, you see what's really happening. 2 toddlers are unsupervised. No one is actually watching them. And the gate, which would have been the only barrier to danger, was left open. This isn't just accidental oversight. This is a pattern of negligence, described with calm, practiced phrasing. No alarm, no guilt. Just a quiet, measured delivery of what amounts to child endangerment. Any parent knows, if you lose sight of your toddler for 10 seconds, your heart drops. You run, you yell, you fall apart. But Trezell and Jacqueline, they never take responsibility. They describe their absence like it was a family routine, like it was safe. And that's what's most disturbing. They don't even seem to understand that what they're describing isn't okay. Because in their minds, this wasn't neglect. It was just a normal day. And that tells us way more than they ever intended. Red flag number 4. No fear of the unknown. In every missing child case, there's one thing that consumes the parents, not knowing. They question everything. They spiral. They second-guess themselves with every breath. But in this interview, there's no panic, no wondering, no fear of the unknown. They never say, we don't know where they are. We're scared. We're desperate for answers. Because in their version of the story, there are no questions, only answers.
They are going to be here in this area.
I definitely know they're not walking around. They're not that kind.
That kind of confidence doesn't come from grief. It doesn't come from fear. It comes from someone who's not searching because they know the truth. Even when asked about their intuition, Jacqueline doesn't hesitate.
I definitely know they're not walking around.
Not, I don't know what happened. We just want answers. We hope someone saw something. Just certainty, over and over. But here's where it becomes even more disturbing. A reporter brings up the biological mother's accusation.
You know, we just spoke to the biological mother. She says she had a conversation with you guys, and that she thinks there's some kind of foul play involved. That she thinks you guys did something.
And that's understandable.
What's your response to that?
That's understandable. I would think the same thing.
That's not true. We would never hurt them. Not even, we didn't do anything. Just, that's understandable. That's not denial. That's not confusion. That's not outrage. That's someone guiding your perception, not defending their truth. Because when you're innocent, accusations like that shake you. You react. You fight to be believed. But when you're guilty, you stay calm. You manage the moment. You perform. And in this case, the performance wasn't just emotionless. It was controlled, measured, calculated. So while every innocent parent is drowning in fear of the unknown, these two, they were already acting like they knew the ending. Red flag number 5, a script, not a search. When you're frantically looking for your missing child, your memory burns with detail. You remember the streets you drove, the people you yelled to, the exact moment you realized they were gone. It's a blur of panic and action, but it's real, and it shows. But Trezell, he doesn't give us that. Instead, he gives us a line he repeats like it's protecting him. I searched. That's it. Over and over. No locations, no street names, no landmarks, no timeline, no sense of direction or duration. It's not that he doesn't remember. It's that he doesn't have anything to remember, because this wasn't a real search. This was a script. Even his movements sound like placeholders.
I came back outside and I started searching my backyard. I searched the whole thing. I got in the van. I looked down the street, both directions, and I hit a bunch of corners. I went down this street. I turned my light on. I searched. I called their names. Talked to a gentleman on the street on the other side over there. He didn't see me.
These aren't the words of a panicked father. They're the words of someone building a scene, not reliving an experience. In fact, that one conversation
Talked to a gentleman on the street on the other side over there. He didn't see me.
Might be the only real part of the story. And it's telling that it's the only line with any detail at all. That's a known pattern in deceptive speech. Anchor one truth inside a web of fiction and make the whole thing feel stable. But listen closely. You'll hear the hollowness. This wasn't a search. It was sound and filler, an attempt to create an illusion of action without any of the heart. And if your kids really were missing, you wouldn't stop at, I searched. You'd be screaming where you looked, what you saw, who you begged for help. But here, we get none of that. Because they didn't search, they rehearsed. Red flag number 6, a story too clean to be true. Real life is messy, especially during a crisis. People forget things. They contradict themselves. They panic. They scramble. But this story is too clean.
It was cold. I was going to make a fire. My wife's inside. She was actually wrapping gifts. They was playing with chalk. And I came in the house. I saw them there. I went in the house. I came back out. I didn't see them there.
That's not a crisis. That's a storyboard. Everything they say fits neatly into a calm domestic afternoon. Everything feels placed, positioned, safe. Like they're building an alibi, not recalling an event. But here's the problem. There's no chaos, no confusion, not even any emotion. Just a series of tidy, logical actions meant to sound like normal parenting. But that's the problem. This isn't a normal parenting moment. This is supposed to be the moment they lost 2 children. Where's the panic? Where's the yelling? Where's the heartbreak? If this were real, it would be disjointed. One of them would say something the other didn't mention. They'd overlap, interrupt, backtrack. But here, they stay in step. Their story doesn't unravel because it never was real enough to fall apart. And when you stack it all together, chalk drawings, gift wrap, firewood, you don't get the feeling of a family in crisis. You get the feeling of a couple telling you what they want you to picture. And the scariest part, the picture never included the boys. Red flag number 7. The boys were never real to them. When children go missing, parents talk about who they are, not just what happened. They describe their quirks, their favorites, their fears. They bring them to life for the world because the world needs to know who they're looking for. But in this interview, the boys never come to life. They're barely even present. Trezell refers to them as our youngest two. They're rambunctious. They're kids. They like to wrestle. That's not connection. That's a label, a category, a file folder. They never once say their names. They don't share their favorite toys. They don't talk about how one of them laughs when he's tickled or how the other one clings to a favorite blanket. There's no fond memories. None of that is here. What we get instead is
They are going to be rambunctious, very playful, very rambunctious, and they do love to wrestle. They do love to kind of get rough with each
They're
other.
kids.
They're kids.
it's vague, detached, mechanical. It's how a teacher might describe students on a form, not how a parent describes their children to the world in a moment of crisis. And here's something else that I found interesting. They didn't just lose the boys' names in the interview. They changed them legally after adopting them. And maybe that's just procedure. But maybe it's something else. Because when you erase a child's name, you erase their history. You overwrite their identity. You make them yours in every way.
And they came to us, and they became our children. And we named them, and they are our children. And so we want them back.
And in a case where control shows up everywhere, in language, in behavior, in emotional delivery, even the name change feels less like parenting and more like possession. And when you're asked directly, tell us about the boys, and you still can't bring yourself to say their names, that's not forgetfulness. That's not shock. That's someone going out of their way to keep things impersonal, to keep things vague, to keep Orson and Orrin at a distance. And when a parent refuses to say their child's name, even once, you have to wonder, is it because it hurts, or is it because they've already let go? Red flag number 8, the vanishing point that doesn't exist. In every missing child case, there's a moment that becomes the anchor. This is when I last saw them. It's burned into memory. It's the moment the world split in two. But in this case, that moment never really shows up.
I was playing with chalk, and I came in the house. I saw them there. I went in the house. I came back out. I didn't see them now.
Hold on. Who was playing? Who came in? Who saw who? There are no pronouns, no subject, no clear actor. Instead of saying, I saw them, they were outside, I told them to stay close, we get fragments, ghost sentences, and it gets worse. Trezell says, I didn't see them now.
I came back out. I didn't see them now.
Now. That's a tense slip. Past and present crashing into each other. When someone is reliving a real memory, their tense always stays rooted in the past. But when someone is imagining a scene, or worse, fabricating one, they often start talking like it's unfolding in real time. That slip, now, suggests this isn't even a memory. It's a mental movie they're trying to walk us through. And in the middle of all this, there's still one detail they never locked down. Who actually saw the boys last? Was it Jacqueline? Was it Trezell? Was it both of them? Was it anyone? That moment, the most important of all, is blurry, unanchored, unclaimed, suspiciously vague. And in a case like this, vagueness is not confusion, it's protection. Because if no one takes ownership of the last sighting, then no one can be blamed for what happened next. Red flag number 9, grief that needs a prompt. When your children are missing, your grief doesn't wait for a cue. It doesn't need a script. It pours out of you, unfiltered, raw, and relentless. But in this interview, Trezell and Jacqueline's emotion only shows up when someone else drags it out of them. And even then, it's faint. It's shallow. It's like watching people try to remember how grief is supposed to sound. Listen to how the reporters start prompting them.
At what time did you guys notice your kids went missing, and at what time were they reported missing to the police? Would you say it was maybe within an hour, a couple hours? What kind of boys are these? Tell us about the boys. Speaking about what you guys are feeling is difficult, what do you want them at home to understand about this whole situation?
These aren't just clarifying questions, they're rescue attempts. The interviewers are pulling emotion out of a vacuum because the parents aren't offering anything up on their own. Most parents can't stop talking. They repeat themselves, they ramble, they overshare because they're desperate to be heard, desperate to be helped. But Trezell and Jacqueline, they sit quietly, wait, react. They only talk when they are asked a question.
They are going to be rambunctious, very playful, very rambunctious, and they do love to wrestle. They do love to kind of get rough with each
They're
other.
kids.
They're kids.
It's all surface level, no depth, no stories, no ache. And that absence, that void where urgency and heartbreak should be, says more than anything they did manage to say. Because if your love for a child needs to be coached out of you, if your desperation only shows up after you've been nudged, then maybe it wasn't there at all. Red flag number 10, reputation over rescue. When your children are missing, your focus should be on one thing, getting them back. Not how you're being perceived, not how calm you look, not how helpful you seem. But throughout this interview, Trezell and Jacqueline West appear more concerned with defending themselves than with finding their sons.
I don't want you guys thinking we didn't try. We actually looked
tried.
before we called
We
the
looked,
police.
yes.
Yes.
Yes, we did. We searched before we called the cops. We let them come in and search with us. We asked them to come do that.
These aren't pleas. They're PR points, rehearsed, repeated, and clearly designed to sell a version of themselves. This is what deception experts call perception management, when someone is more focused on looking innocent than acting desperate. And then they say,
We wanted to keep searching, but we couldn't go outside. We could never talk to anybody, and that was the issue.
maybe that's true, but maybe it wasn't to protect them. Maybe the police weren't stopping them from helping. Maybe they were stopping them because they were already suspicious. Because sometimes when investigators spot red flags, they stop searching outward and start watching the people right in front of them. Maybe the cops weren't waiting for leads. Maybe they already had them.
How did they get a search warrant? Did you guys?
I
no
don't
idea.
see why they got one, but they got one. We
Yeah,
would
they
have let them
didn't
take
need one,
anything.
but-
We would have let them take everything.
Again, we were told the best are out here looking already. Just to stay put, they have more questions. There was literally a cop with us the whole time in
And
there.
He had sitting down. We would ask, can we go help? They had to sit
Said
down.
nope.
He said, no, we got the best out there.
But here's the thing. Who has the need to convince you they're being cooperative? The people who aren't being cooperative. Innocent people don't oversell. They don't need to. They're too focused on finding their kids to care about how they come across. But in this case, everything mattered except for the boys. So those were the 10 red flags I couldn't ignore. And while this interview is disturbing on its own, it's also a blueprint. Because once you start seeing these patterns, the emotional detachment, the linguistic distance, the performance over pain, you start to recognize them elsewhere. And that's the point. What we've unpacked here isn't just about this case. It's something that we can take with us into every future media interview where parents speak out after a child goes missing. It's about learning to separate performance from pain, control from chaos, and truth from storytelling. So if this analysis helped you look a little closer, or if you've noticed something I didn't, drop it in the comments below. I want to hear what stood out to you. And if you want to keep sharpening this lens together, analyzing more interviews, more behavior, and more cases, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell. Thank you so much for watching.